Already, hospital facilities have begun to crack under the strain.
Major cities in all parts of the country, New York, Los Angeles, report plague victims falling dead in the streets, in their homes, at their work.
Colorado Channel, this is a Class 1 emergency. All civilian traffic is barred from streets and highways. Stay in your homes. Stay in your homes. Those found without specific military orders are subject to summary execution. Stay in your homes. Repeat, Colorado Channel, this is a Class 1 emergency. All civilian traffic is barred from streets and highways.
Hi there, this is John Seven, and you are listening to How I Spent My Pandemic, in which I talk to people about how they passed the time and the terror during this worldwide COVID nightmare. Though it's not a nightmare for everyone, it is for some, and I acknowledge that. For other people, it's a little smoother, and that may be the case for my guest this episode. Are you familiar with Joe Ollmann? Well, I have Joe on the ringer. Joe is from Hamilton, Ontario. That's in Canada. And Joe is a fantastic graphic novelist. He has done some funny and intelligent work that everyone should read. Titles like Midlife and Science Fiction. And the one I love the most, The Abominable Mr. Seabrook, which dramatizes the life of William Bueller Seabrook. That was published by Drawn and Quarterly. For those of you who don't know, Seabrook was a journalist who was obsessed with the so-called exotic cultures and helped spread the way that we look at those cultures still. And it's not in a very respectful or realistic way. And Seabrook was pretty nuts. And Joe does a great job with that book. It's entertaining and fascinating and really draws you in. And Joe has a new book coming out in 2021, also from Drawn and Quarterly, and that is called Fictional Father. And the way he described it to me was that it's about a cartoonist, a fictional cartoonist. He made up the cartoonist. And he's kind of an old school cartoonist, kind of like a Charles Schulz level of fame. And he's popularly referred to as everybody's dad. And he's a big deal. He's got T-shirts and greeting cards and all that of his characters. And in real life, he's a horrible father. And his son is a failed artist with lots of personal problems. But something happens, and the son has to take over the father's comic strip. And that's what the graphic novel's about. And Joe also includes samples of the comic strip through the decades that it runs. That's May from D&Q. But as to Joe's life, I talked to him about what he was doing when the pandemic first became obvious and serious, even in Hamilton, Ontario, and looked at what he was doing as he hunkered down with his family.
I had co-curated a giant show of Canadian comics last year, and that show was supposed to be traveling to Germany to the Erlangen Comics Festival, and we were supposed to go with it. Alana Traficante, the other curator, and myself were going to go and help set it up and give talks or whatever. So that fell through because the festival was canceled. So that was like a big thing that was kind of interesting and would have been neat. Other than that, my life wasn't affected much. I worked part-time at a bookstore, a little independent bookstore here in Hamilton, Ontario, Epic Books, and that was shut down along with everything else. So the bookstore was closed, and then the owner, Jamie, she quickly got the bookstore online. She's kind of resisted that forever, but did it because it was necessary, and it kept the store alive. It was like a miracle because people, that's all they wanted. They wanted books, and they wanted puzzles and stuff to do in those early months of complete lockdown. And so the store was like a warehouse, and me and my kid, who was 15, would deliver books 3 times a week. It was crazy. It was like, and my kid was navigating for me. I hired him. He's really savvy at all that stuff. And he became like a New York cabbie. Like he knew the city. He goes, "Oh, don't take Queen. There's construction. You want to go over onto Fifth, you know?" And it was like, and it was really nice. That was the other thing about this thing in the midst of the horror, you know, for other people. I mean, it didn't affect us personally. We were like in this little bubble with a 15-year-old who was kind of moving on to his own thing with his friends very much before this, and he was forced into close proximity with us. So it was like one last kind of hurrah for us all
Oh yeah.
together, which was lovely. I felt really lucky for that. My main thing in this like was like keeping my mom safe. She's 85 and she's like super spry and
Yeah.
healthy. We have her locked in a hermetically sealed house, and I've been doing her groceries every week, and you know I visit and I have a coffee with her from a long distance, and I wash my own cup and spoon so that she's not touching anything I'm touching.
Hmm.
Uh, so um, overall, my life. I mean, I'm a cartoonist. I'm largely a hermit. I'm in my
Right.
basement working all day, and then I cook dinner and hang out with the family, and then I'm back down there all night. So nothing much changed for me.
Right. Right.
It was very similar, and just following the news closely, and just like the anxiety of it all, watching you know just crazy irresponsible behavior by people.
So there is a kind of Jekyll Hyde aspect to a cartoonist life because yes, you are often solitary in your work, but then there are bursts of super crowds because you do conventions.
Yeah.
Most cartoonists I know do conventions, at least a few
Hmm.
a year,
Hmm.
and that obviously changed for you.
Yeah, that was a big thing. Like not going to TCAF. I've been to every TCAF since the beginning of it when it was in a church basement. And So that was a big thing when that didn't happen in May this year. I don't miss those. Like, I mean, I do. I miss seeing other people like at these festivals. It's amazing, like seeing all your cartoony friends that you just know online and hanging out. And so I miss that. But interacting with people is always terrifying. Talking in public, doing talks is always terrifying. Doing panels is terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, I'm much. I am very comfortable just being a hermit. So yeah. So for me, this is like I kind of joke about it, but it's kind of true as well. Like it's been kind of ideal for me. This like
Yes.
not going out. It's fine.
Yes. It's same here.
Yeah.
So, um, but while you're inside, what sort of things? Because you were talking about your son.
Mm.
Um, what sort of things besides driving around have you been able to bond with him doing?
Well,
Activities and such.
we're movie freaks, so I've been like exposing him to. At the beginning of this, we were watching like like 1, 2 movies a day. I'm just getting old, 1970s and old
Hmm.
Hammer horror films, and just going through stuff that I love. We do that every Friday night anyway. He stays home and we watch movies, and I introduce him to like Charlie Kaufman. He didn't know Charlie Kaufman. He saw Being John Malkovich, and his mind
Okay.
was blown. He was at the right age for that, and he was just like, "Oh my god!" So we did that. I mean, I had grand plans at the beginning of this. This whole thing seemed fraught with like, in the midst of all the horror of it, it was also fraught with opportunity. Like you have all this time.
Right.
Um, I thought, oh, I'll make like something about this. Like I'll do like something about the plague, like Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, make this something about it. I realized very quickly that I had nothing clever to say about it, and there was nothing interesting happening in my life to talk about. So it was very mundane. It was just, so there was nothing there. Um, I At the beginning I sat down and I said, you know what? This is it. You're going to learn how to play the goddamn piano, Joe. And I sat down at the keyboard and I got the iPad with like a YouTube lessons, and I was like, I set it up and I was all like, yes, this is it. You're finally going to learn the piano. And it was humbling and ridiculous because I like after listening to them for like literally a minute and a half, I was like, you can't do this. This is impossible. So I gave up on that, and that was it. The other thing, I was exercising more regularly. Like I'm running on the treadmill every day. Like I don't have the
Nice.
excuse of being too busy.
Right.
So I probably am healthier for that. I was doing 300 push-ups a day at the beginning of this
Wow.
for 3 months. Yeah, I know. I said I'm going to be ripped at the end of this, but I realized that I couldn't do 300 push-ups a day. It was killing my weird shoulders because I sit wrong and I draw for too long, and so my shoulders are screwy. And after 2 months of 300 push-ups a day, I was in super pain. So and there was no gain. There was no physical gains. Like I wasn't getting ripped. I was just in pain. So I cut that out. I went down to like 50 a day. I just do 50 push-ups a day, which is more reasonable. Um, and yeah, I other than that, I mean, it's just been adjusting to people being on Zoom. Like my wife is a professor, so she's teaching online. Her York University is largely online, mostly online. So she's not commuting. She's home, and I have to be quiet when I'm walking by, and she's teaching on Zoom.
Yeah.
My kid is doing half online, half in class, so he's also on Zoom. I have to. He's in the kitchen, sort of at the table, and she's in her room. I have to tiptoe around. There's a lot of tiptoeing around, but yeah. But other than that, it's been fairly normal.
Yeah. Though you find yourself with time to fill too, which seems different.
Yeah, I mean, I luckily I was busy. I was doing revisions on the book I was working on, the new book
Okay.
that's just going to, like, I'm sending it off to D&Q list this week probably. I just have the last few changes to make, but I was redrawing a large section of that, so I had work to do, which was good because I wouldn't want to have been home with all this time and nothing to do. That would have been horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was busy, so I had lots of things to do, kept me occupied.
Now, what was it like, because I'm not Canadian,
Yeah,
when it began? And I, you try to keep an eye on what's happening in other countries, but this kind of escalating
yeah.
horror in the beginning in your own makes
Mm.
it hard to totally do that. And I'm curious what it was like, as you watched it unfold, not far
Well,
to the north of me.
no, but slightly different. Their handling was slightly different, that's for sure. The what I mean, we started. I guess I kind of like my wife's family are Chinese, and so we kind of like you pay attention to what's happening in China because her mom has friends there and relatives there. So we were watching what was happening in China, and I started realizing like in February I was like, this is probably gonna come here. Like it's definitely moving and you saw people starting to buy toilet paper. That
Right.
was the thing here. That is toilet paper disappeared everywhere, and it's happening again because we're entering a second wave. And I just don't know. Like it wasn't even a gastrointestinal thing. I don't know what people were thinking about the toilet paper. I don't know. Anyway, it's happening again. I mean, at the beginning, I guess around February, I started thinking like, oh, I feel like this is gonna be a thing, and so like I didn't go into like panic mode, but I did go and buy like a big bag of flour and
Yeah.
some various dried beans and rice, and I was like, I'm not going to be a panicky hoarder mental case, but I it just pays to like be somewhat prepared in case things go to hell. And the thing in Canada was the government response was largely responsible, and it was like they were like, okay, we have to shut down the economy, and they did, and they kept it shut down for quite a long time. And if you shut it down, you have to pay people. Like you can't.
Mm.
So they did, and then they were very quick with the response, which we had was called CERB, I guess CERB, was like this checks that they sent to people, and from people I talked to, they got them very quickly. Like it was fast. I mean, I was still working, and my wife was still working. I didn't need to do that. I was still delivering books at a bookstore and that. Um, so, and I'm my work is freelance anyway, so
Mm.
it was ongoing. So it was just like a pretty decent response by the government. It also made me realize that we're talking about potential of this thing. It was like I really had this utopian ideal, like people would go, well, the economy is imaginary, and money is imaginary, and
Hmm.
debt is imaginary, and mortgages are imaginary, and we don't need to have these things. Like I thought this is going to be a giant worldwide shift. Like that was my utopian fantasy that people would rethink how we're operating, because everything we're doing now it just seems crazy and wrong. And but that did not happen. There was no
No.
utopian change for the better. I don't know how we'll get to that, but anyway, it's. I find. Do you find, like, as someone who like has cared about lefty politics for a long time, do you have a kind of a tiny, in spite of the horrors of the political system, but a tiny bit of hope, like just in the fact that in mainstream media they're saying the word socialism, and that defunding the police is actually like a mainstream idea now, like that. Those kind of things give me a tiny bit of hope.
Yeah, I don't know if hope's the right word, but
No.
it makes me feel better.
Yeah,
Um, but things take so long.
it's slow. Ugh, it's
Yeah.
frustratingly slow.
So these may be things I never see in my lifetime for all I know, but my
I
kids
know.
may.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
especially here, because
Hmm.
I don't know that it's the same in Canada, but in the States, there's such a resistance, A, to change,
Hmm.
and B, to perceived bad things, that have always been bad
Hmm.
in the American eyes. So socialism, we have it, we have our own versions of it in different places, but if you call it that,
Yeah,
certain people just, go ballistic.
yeah.
And so I guess things like socialist ideas here, I have hope, but not calling them socialist, kind of slipping them through without people noticing them.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
that's it. You have to disguise it. Like put a
yeah.
lot of ketchup and mustard on that hot dog. Or they're not going to eat it. I know it's like I think that's the one of the most amazing things with American politics, and slightly less in Canada, um, is to convince working people that unions are not in their interest and that socialism is not in their
Hmm.
interest. Like that's an amazing thing to have accomplished, to brainwash a whole people that things that are amazing for them are bad for them.
Yeah, we do that well.
It's very
I
successful.
have to
Like
yeah.
it's incredible that you would have poor working people decrying these things. It's quite an accomplishment.
Well, down here we're always, the left anyway, sort of holds Canada in high reverence, and it always seems like it doesn't have the same demons as we do. But I know
Oh,
that there are issues, say, with
oh God,
the native population,
yes,
and
yeah,
there are things.
yeah.
But one thing that's really new on our horizon, and it occurred to me, I should ask you this. The craziest thing to happen in our country in years is the QAnon stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know that it has an application in Canada, but I wondered, is that stuff visible
Yeah,
for you?
there's people here in Canada that love Trump, and they're supportive of Trump, and I mean it has nothing to do with them, and they embrace that. They're like, I love
Mm,
that. My brother talks about having friends. Like I don't know anyone personally because I hang around in a bubble of weirdo artists and musicians and that, so none of them are going to be into this sort of stuff. But
right.
I think there is that. I mean, I try and debunk that when people on Twitter are like, "America sucks and Canada's amazing," and look at what's happening in Canada. It's always like this wholesome thing, and that's nice, but it's not a realistic portrayal of what it's like in Canada. There's shit tons of racism in Canada, and there's like just a long grotesque history of our treatment of the indigenous people in this
Mm,
country, with the residential schools, and the uh, missing and murdered women in this country, and nothing is ever done about it, and midnight rides where cops take indigenous people out to the edges of town and leave them there to freeze, and just the rates of incarceration of indigenous people, and the taking indigenous kids away from their parents, and it's ongoing. Like it's nothing new, and our government, uh, the liberal government, suing to get to not pay out money to indigenous kids. And in the northern parts, like so many reserves do not have access to clean water or running water,
Mm.
and healthcare is not as good up there. Education is not as good, which forces kids to move to more southern towns, and they're away from their parents, and they end up disappearing and dying. It happens. So, and that's just within the indigenous people of this country, the, the First Nations. I mean, there's entrenched racism in this country, the same as anywhere else. I mean, it's fictional to portray us as some kind of wonderland of decency and kindness. And I try and tell that to people, not to be a downer or anything, but we got lots of problems here with racism and everything else. So yeah, that's a myth.
Yeah. Though you are more polite.
Oh yeah, well my wife talked about that when we first met. Like and I was like decrying the polite racism of Canada, and she said, "Well, as a person who's had racial slurs shouted at me, I would prefer the polite racism than the overt racism." And I'm like, okay, fair enough, yeah. So I guess polite racism is slightly better. I
Yeah.
don't know, not really,
Well,
but
my one Canadian more polite than the U.S. story is years ago we were in Halifax in driving around, and we were kind of confused where we were supposed to go. I guess we had a destination and we were a little confused at like an intersection.
yeah.
And someone coming, in the left lane, coming the opposite way, stopped next to our car, leaned out and said, "Hey, are you guys lost? Do you need
They
directions?"
they saw the confusion in your face.
Yes.
That's
That would
pretty.
never happen here, in
Uh,
any state, anywhere.
okay,
Um,
but it's funny. Like every time I've been in America, people will always talk to you. Like
yeah.
I find in like I don't know. I'm less likely to just talk to a stranger. I don't do it. And when I lived in Montreal for years, there was always the possibility of not speaking the same language, so people kept to themselves. They didn't really interact much. So I got used to that living
Mm.
in a big city where you didn't interact much. But every time I've been in America, like if I'm on a bus there or anywhere, people will tell you their whole life story. Like they're like, I just got out of prison and I'm heading home to see my dad who I've never met before and he's dying. And I'm like, whoa. I actually have had that conversation with someone on in a Greyhound in Oregon. It, they were very forthcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, Americans like
Americans do like to talk.
yeah,
US Americans.
they're
Um,
gregarious. Like they will talk to you. Yeah.
though some cities are genuinely friendly and polite,
Mhm.
in ways that are surprising. Like, I've been very surprised to find out that Providence, Rhode Island is a place where I've had very good just interaction with the humans living there, where they're
Mhm.
much more polite than say Boston, which
Okay.
is just up the way.
Mm.
And that's unexpected. You
Mm.
don't get it much here.
Mm.
Um, do you know if the show, the museum show,
Mm.
will be rescheduled in Germany?
There is some talk of it, yeah, but I mean, it would be complicated because the nice thing was we had the Art Gallery of Hamilton where we did the show. It was amazing. We had about 600 and plus pieces of original art,
Hmm.
all Canadian cartoonists from just like Carol Mauswitch and all the big guns. We had a big room with the big four like Seth Chester, Julie Doucette, and Fiona Smith. It was a really I'm so happy how it turned out, and I'm really proud and grateful that the art gallery let us do this giant, ridiculous, complicated show that was really expensive, and we paid all the artists, and it was really successful for the museum as well. Like they had really good response. So, but all of that artwork we had just taken it down, and it was in their vaults before we returned it to the people, and then we got permission from the artists to take their artwork to Germany. So it was happening like in June, I think. And then they realized that Germany was in lockdown and it was going to be canceled. So there's talk of rescheduling it in some format, but we would have to, it would be a lot trickier because they'd have to contact all the artists again themselves, and ship that artwork separately. There'd be an expense. So I don't know that it'll happen, but the German government and the Canadian government would have had some kind of cross pollination thing of sending Canadian artists to Germany that year. They were like the featured artists, so that was the comics thing was part of it. So they're planning on doing that in 2021. So there may still be, maybe there'll be a talk about it, a presentation and a slideshow about it, what it would entail. But it was amazing, like seeing like David Boswell read Fleming originals. Like, oh, I was in heaven. I had white gloves on, and just every time a package would come in, it'd be like, oh my God, I'm holding Julie Doucet's like beautiful originals of like things that I saw when I was 18 years old and blew my mind. And that's just seeing them in real life. It brought tears in my eyes, really.
Your books have a certain subject matter. I don't want to say darker because that's not really what it is, but and I can't really think of a word, but maybe the question makes it obvious why I'm saying that. Did anything about this pandemic experience sort of plant themselves in your brain in regard to your comics work? You talked about your pandemic year idea that didn't go anywhere, but
Yeah.
any other aspects stick with you?
No, it's funny. Like, I mean, the book I'm putting out right now in a present political time, it couldn't be less pertinent to the political situation. It's like it's about rich old white men. Like, it's like and I'm all I talk about is political situations, and it's all that I care about. But it never comes into my work for some reason, and I don't know why that is. I've tried during this the whole reign of this orange fellow in your country to write commentary about it, and I have such great respect for artists that like Warren Craighead, who does those amazing drawings, like monster drawings of Trump, and Eli, I can't remember the artist's name, but they're really gruesome and really dark cartoons about Trump and the world. And Lauren Weinstein, who did amazing comics about the whole situation after the election. I have such respect for them, and there's just so many that can express political ideas in comics form. Whenever I try and do it, it's just like a stream of obscenity. I'm just so like angry about it. I can't put it into any coherent, like I'm not capable of it. I realize that. So I just make what comes to my mind, and I do that. And I guess there is like maybe tiny political notions within there, but not really. So I don't know if this pandemic will affect my work at all. I think it might affect my work ethic because I am a workaholic, and during this I've kind of taken time to just lie on the couch and read a lot and listen to records and be a little more chill. So maybe I won't do as much work after. I don't know. But I think that's good. I think everybody, the kind of work ethics have slipped in this, and I think that's good because that whole Protestant work ethic is such bullshit, especially in the comics world where people do this like macho thing about how long they work, and it's really sick and it's kind of twisted. Like, it's not healthy for you to be sitting that long, and so it's not something to brag about, really. Anyway, So maybe that's one effect of this change my work ethic for the worst.
Thanks to Joe Ollmann for talking today. And what you should do is go out and buy a Joe Ollmann book and pick up Fictional Father when it's out in 2021. You should also go to destroythemightyatom.bandcamp.com and listen to more music by the Mighty Atom. They do all my music on this show. As for me, I'm John 7. You can find me at john7.me, and that'll tell you all my secrets. So long.